As I mentioned in last week's episode, I do need to work on the petticoat and the chimney for the locomotive, for the Tich. There's one other thing I did not mention, which it'll be pretty easy and kind of fun, a lot less stress than the superheater. That is the blower valve, and there's a little 1/8" copper pipe. It has a little nozzle on top of it, which is unusual. That's interesting. My Allen Mogul, I didn't have a nozzle like that. So we'll get into that, and of course there's a little nut and a copper ring that go in here. Happily, we've already made the little bronze fitting that'll go in the boiler, little copper cone here, or nipple if you will, and then also the nut that keeps that on, so I don't have to make those things. I haven't silver soldered this on yet. I was going to wait till I form the tube to the right shape. But this will be the side against the bulkhead, if you will, of the firewall of the boiler. I do need to make a little a cone for the for this part, for the blower, actually the orifice, if you will. And it's interesting, I pulled this out. I think this will be too big, but this is the one I used to taper the inside of the boiler, or of the exhaust, when I made the existing exhaust piece, which is right here. And it's funny, I kind of got myself second guessing about this, if that's how it's supposed to be, and I reread the directions, and sure enough, it is supposed to be tapered inside here. And I consulted with some of my references, my books that show that tapering it inside increases the velocity of the exhaust, apparently. So anyway, that's good to go. So first thing I'm going to do is make a tiny version of this out of some 3/16" brass hex stock that'll be screwed onto the end of the copper tube that we end up making for the boiler. The other piece is the petticoat and the chimney. So here's the cast chimney. Haven't figured out about the machining steps for that yet. And here is the brass 5/8" brass pipe that I plan to use to make the petticoat out of. So more about that as we go along. The first step in making the blower nut is to chuck the 3/16" brass hex and face it off. And then center drill it. There's already a little hole there, so I'm going to go a little deep, knowing that I need an 1/8", just under an 1/8" hole. Then we're going to drill a number 37, which is tapping size for the 540 screw. We'll do that 1/8 inch deep. And now we've got the tapping size hole made. I use the 540 tap held in the tailstock holder, tapping holder, and I've gone in there with this is the regular, ordinary taper tap, as you can see, hopefully. And I've got a bottoming tap. I'll go in and finish the bottom of the hole with that. There's the 540 bottoming tap. As you can see, it's really got a blunt edge on it, so you definitely need to use the initial taper tap to get things started. Sorry about the focus, that's kind of weird. Now we cut it off. Before I finish this, I'm going to use a little triangular file, try to make it smooth there on the edge. We're going to have to smooth that in eventually, in a couple steps anyway. The book says to cut it off and then reverse it, and then we can put the through hole in the other way in the shape of cone shape on the outside. So do that. Hope it doesn't go very far once it's cut off. Taking it easy, so hopefully it'll just fall right down. Okay, here's the parted off part. I just put it in the 3-jaw chuck and face the top flat and drill a number 50 air hole through. Oh, and make the outside cone shape, kind of round it off a little bit. We'll do that. Here we're using the form tool to put a little bit of a decorative edge, decorative shape on the outside of the nozzle. Just feeding it in very gently. As you can see, it's pretty close to the jaws. That should be fine. Alright, here we are drilling the number 50 hole. Drilling it through. That'll be our little air hole for the blower. Now that we've made the little nut, the blower thing that will go on basically where my finger is tapping here, I've taken a little pipe cleaner and twisted it up in roughly the shape that it needs to be, mostly so I can get a measurement on how long I need to make this thing. And you can put that in there, but I don't know if you can see this or not, but I just wanted to get a piece. It's got to go or bend, come around and then go up next to the steam pipe outlet there. Just so the whole purpose of a blower is to create a draft up the chimney. So it needs to be about this long, and my point in bringing that out now is I'm going to need to thread the very end of it, the number 540 threads, and with copper it's very soft, so I need to cut off a piece of it nice and straight, at least on the very end, and then probably do my little trick of crazy gluing a drill bit on the inside to make it stiff, and then I can thread that portion. Then I can heat it up, get the drill bit out, and then we can anneal the copper and bend it to shape. Alright, I cut the piece of brass off at a little longer than I need. Probably it's about almost 5 inches. Give me plenty of room to bend, and I chamfered the edge, cleaned it out, and I got a number 52 drill bit here that I'm about to clean this off with some acetone and then put it in with crazy glue, and that'll make the pipe nice and stiff for me to thread the end of it. Okay, here we are all set. I filed it, and I got it in the lathe. I filed a little bit of a taper on there, but you can see the overall outside dimension is still 1/8 of an inch, 125 thou, right on time. So looking good. I've got the 540 die in the tailstock die holder. We'll go ahead and put a thread on it. That worked out really well. I put a little tap paste on the end there, and I used the power lathe, the lathe at 70 RPM, and do it, two-handed. One hand on the inching button on the lathe, and the other hand holding the die in the tailstock die holder, and I just gently guided on there. Did this nice portion here, just gentle pressure, and it keeps it uniform and came out very nice. So all we got to do now is to get the heat gun out, heat this thing up, and pull the drill bit out with the crazy glue. Okay, here's the part with the trusty drill bit removed, and I did have to heat the thing up. There's my little heat gun. I really like that one. It's a Milwaukee corded heat gun that I inherited from my father-in-law. But you can see the little nozzle fits on there really nice. And I've loosened up the chuck here. Let's see if we can pull this. Can't pull it out all the way. I'm going to have to loosen that a little bit more. But pretty happy with the progress so far. Here's the little tube so far, bent basically into shape. As you can tell by the dark discoloration on it, I have annealed it several times, basically after each bend. And I got this nice sharp U bend in this one up here by using a little bending tool that I have. I'll show you that in a second, but wanted to show very quickly what I think the alignment's going to look like here. Obviously I've got to silver solder the fittings onto the free end, so to speak, but you can see the little nozzle in place and how it's a pretty good fit there right next to the blast nozzle of the exhaust. I can tweak it a little bit. I might want to put it in front. It's going to be a tight squeeze in here with all this stuff. Again, we're very glad that I've fitted everything together. It would be impossible to do all this, unless you had very long, strong fingers to get it all done with the smoke box in place. But I think that's going to work out pretty well. So right now we'll go ahead and silver solder the fitting on and re-anneal the entire pipe so we can make any little tiny bends that we need to, the final bends that will be called for to get this thing done. Alright, there we go. It's pretty well done. I'm keeping the heat on it for a few seconds more just to let it even out, make sure everything's good here, and then I'll let it air cool for a while before I quench it. I'm also going to heat up the tube. Just gently anneal that a little bit, just so we don't, if we do have to make some final bends, we don't tweak it or pinch it. We'll do the whole thing. Oops, probably didn't get you. I really do like this little mini torch. This thing is so nice. Just like the box says, a thread-like flame. It's very controlled, very fun to use. Here's the blower tube in place. Pretty pleased with how it came out. It's got the little brass nozzle on it. It's just in there finger tight right now, but the copper fitting, the cone is silver soldered in place. So we'll take that apart now, remove the brass cone here and put it inside the pickle for a little while. I'm not going to leave it in overnight because the nut won't come off, and what I understand is that the pickle, even though I use a really mild solution, it can damage the brass pieces. So I did want to show one thing. This is the little tubing bender that I use for the smaller tubes. I forget exactly where I got this. I think I ordered it off of eBay. I think I saw Keith Appleton using it and found it on eBay. So sorry I can't be more specific, but you can see how tiny it is by the way it fits in the palm of my hand, and it is perfect for these small pipes and tubes. So I will keep you posted as we make progress here. Next thing I wanted to tackle this weekend is making the petticoat, and I've got a piece of 5/8 inch brass tube here that I cut off at the 1 3/8 length. I've marked the amount that's supposed to be inside the smoke box and gets flared out, and next thing I'm going to do is to create a little mandrel that we can push this on and then heat up the brass and essentially kind of swedge, however you want to call it, the bell shape on the bottom of it. So I just need to remove about 20 thou here, and I'm going to do that real quick, and we'll slide the tube on, and I'm going to heat it up, anneal it so that it can be swedged without breaking it, hopefully. Okay, after annealing the brass tube and slipping it over the little aluminum mandrel, I used a little copper fitting here, just tapped it in. I do have a little bit of a flare. It's kind of hard to see, but it's starting, so I need to find something that'll give me a little bit bigger of a flare end and just tap it a little bit more. Well, you can't see much of a flare, but I've been using some sockets that have tapered edges on them. Here's some of the smaller ones I used, and I've got a pretty good flare going there now. So let's see if I hold it sideways, if you can see. I think I'm about ready to try this in the locomotive here and see what it looks like. The next step with the petticoat is to make the little liner for it that will get silver soldered to the outside of it. And so as you can see, I'm using a step drill here to drill it, and I've got to the size that is closest. It was very handy because I was able to move this quickly. I knew I had pre-measured it. I knew this wouldn't give me the exact hole size that I need, but now I can put a 5/8 inch drill bit in here and just open it up that last few thou. Okay, here's the annealed piece, and luckily I saved this form. I don't know if y'all remember this, but this is a little piece of the plywood form, or actually it's solid pine, that I used when I drilled the holes in the smoke box. So of course that's the right shape, and what I did was I just gently bent this by hand. It was easy because it was annealed, and then I used the rubber and the little brass mallets to tap it down. So it's pretty good shape here. Obviously it'll pull in when I screw the screws through, but let's see, I see a little wrinkle here. I'm going to tap that out, and then we'll test fit it all together. I'll sand out the hole so that the petticoat fits, and then we'll test fit it in the smoke box. I'll bring you back for the test fitting. Well, the curvature was pretty close with that former, but it wasn't quite perfect. So one thing I did was I've saved a selection of large pipes like this, and I needed to add a little bit of curve to it. So I clamped the edge in this vise, and I just tapped it down with the hammers, and I got it nice bend here. I'll walk over and show you the bend. Also, I did have to trim off a teeny bit on this edge here, because to make the fit, because I've got the inside rim inside the smoke box. So a couple things to think about. Let me show you the fit here. Okay, there's the fit inside. You can see it's a really nice fit. It'll snug up good when I put the screws in. I haven't drilled the screw holes yet. I'll do that last probably. But let me show you the fit from the outside. You can see why I had to trim that because of the rim that comes a 1/4 inch in. I did have to trim the front edge of this piece. I just took a 1/16 of it off. But there we have it. It lines up good, and it still doesn't fit on here. So the next step is to take it over and use, like I said, a Dremel with a grinding or a sanding drum, and just gently open that hole up a little bit so it fits, so the petticoat fits. As we prepare to silver solder the assembly together, one thing I wanted to point out is the dimensions, because the book says to cut the piece of 5/8 inch brass 1 3/8 long, and then poke it through, flare it, poke it through a halfway, and silver solder it from the inside there. I got to tell you, if you look carefully, notice these drawings are whatever they're matching, orographic, orthographic, whatever the heck it is. I took drawing in school, I forget what it's called. But if you notice, the bottom of that petticoat is below the snifter line. And there is no way, as tight as all this stuff is, there's no way in the world that that snifter line clears that petticoat if it sticks down halfway, which is 688 thousandths. So long story short, I measured this, I eyeballed it before I even made the petticoat, and what I come up with is a dimension of a 1/2 inch. So that's what I'm going to set for my silver soldering. I'm going to put a clip around the bottom side here just to hold things steady, and then I'll make sure the clearance basically is on the stick down, if you will, is only like a 1/2 inch, and I think we'll be fine, because I just double checked the measurements on the front of the locomotive, so that should work out well. But just wanted to point that out for the builders out there. Here we've got the petticoat all ready to silver solder, and you might notice I've got 3 pieces of silver solder there. This is the number 45 safety silv and the black flux. Just decided to use this on that part as it's all brass that we're dealing with here. I'm going to use the mini torch, the little torch, and I'll bring you back when it's done. Well, that was interesting. I thought it did something wrong, but my little torch over there, it really didn't have the juice. It produces plenty of heat in a very small space, but I guess there's a lot of heat dissipation with all of that sheet metal. So long story short, I ended up just resorting back to the giant clumsy propane torch with the huge flame, and it seemed to work pretty well. So we'll let this cool and then dunk it, clean it, and pickle it and see how it fits. Well, that was quite an adventure. As I said, the large torch worked very well, so that was good to know. Also, if you can see by this mangled piece of steel, that was the little clip that I had used to keep this thing in the proper place. Well, sure enough, the silver solder stuck, or it dripped through the hole, and it fastened the dang clip into place. So I just reheated with that giant torch head and pried it apart with some vice grips, and trying very carefully not to ruin the part. And I think I succeeded. So I've just dunked it in cold water. I'm going to let it cool off a little bit, and what I'll do is take a file to it and clean it up, clean up the blobs, and a Dremel will come in handy too with a little sanding drum or grinding, and then I'll have to put it in the pickle to clean it up. And then I'm sure there'll be a little bit of straightening out. You can see it did get a little wrinkled in the process, but at least I was able to get the E-clip off without ruining the whole part. So this sure did come out nice. You can see where I filed the excess silver solder out of the way, but I left it overnight in the pickle tank, which for me is just citric acid. It's kettle descaler, and it came out, look how pretty. I wire brushed it and rinsed it in cold water, and and dried it, and that's all I've done to it. So it came out beautiful, got all that scale off of it, and I'm just test fitting it inside. I took the door off of the smoke box. I'm test fitting it inside here. I'm getting ready to clamp it down and then drill some holes so I can put some screws in there. I'll show you what I'm doing in a minute. Here I've got some holes laid out. They're basically 600 thou in from either end and spaced evenly around the petticoat. So I'm going to clamp this down and drill and tap those holes. I think I'm going to use 080 screws, at least for now. And here's my little setup for drilling and tapping the holes. For now I've used 080 screws. I'm using little stainless steel tiny little things with a button head that I got from McMaster Car, and I'm just running the screws from the inside just to hold it in place. I'll see if I can get some brass screws and cut them off and blend them in, or countersink them or something, or just I could just cut these things off so they don't stick out. Maybe I'll just do that. It'd be the simplest thing. But I'm drilling it with my Dremel and the appropriate bit, and then just tapping it by hand, clamping it to the table like this. Seems to work out so far. Alright, here the smoke box is reinstalled on the boiler, and as you can see, that is a very tight fit with the petticoat, and that you can see why I didn't want to make it any longer. It would have interfered with the snifter valve tube. So far so good. Pretty pleased with how that looks. Now we can continue and make the chimney. Now that we've got the petticoat and the stack squared away, then one of the most interesting things is preparing the chimney for its mounting onto the smoke box. So obviously we've got to address this surface here, but that'll be towards the end. The first thing we're going to do is to figure out a way to mount this so that we can bore the center to fit the sleeve, the petticoat sleeve. The book talks about using a block of wood. I've got an idea. My friend Russ gave me a bunch of this Delrin, and what I've done is marked off the areas about 1.25 inches, which corresponds to this relatively flat part of the chimney. So I'm going to cut this off in the bandsaw, cut off that extra 1/2 inch or so, and then mount this in the 3-jaw chuck and bore a hole in the center that will basically fit this part of the body of the chimney. And then once that's done, then I can take this out and split it lengthwise, and I've got a little clamping clamshell that we can use to hold onto the chuck, hold onto the chimney in the 3-jaw chuck, and it'll be large enough that the other parts will clear. Then we can bore it out and then mount it on an arbor and machine the outside of it. So follow along. One thing nice about Delrin is it's really easy to machine. It cut very cleanly on the bandsaw, and now I'm just drilling it out with a 13/16 drill bit in the lathe, and it's going through just like a hot knife through butter. The only downside of it is it squeaks a little bit and it smells. It gives off a strange, unpleasant odor, like burning plastic. I guess that's not unusual. But that's looking good. We can take it out, split it, and use it as our chuck. That was easy so far. So there's the Delrin piece cut in half and fit around the tube of the chimney. Looking good. Now let's put it in the 3-jaw and see if we can bore that hole. Alright, we got it in place, and before I started the drilling, I decided to run through just with one undersized drill just to make sure that it was centered as good as it could be. And after drilling, I ran it through with a 5/8 inch reamer and then tested the fit on the rest of the brass tube that I had left over. That's the tube that I made the petticoat tube out of, and well, I don't have enough room to show you here, but it is a good fit, so I think we're in good shape. Alright, after doing that channel intro, hopefully you saw that, I'm going to get back on the Tich and work on the little chimney. Really, it's the last thing I need to do before I mount this onto an arbor and work on the outside of it, is to clean up the base of it a little bit so that it will fit the smoke box. You can see it's already in pretty good shape. It's been ground a little bit like from the factory. I haven't done anything to this, but it occurred to me I have this as a nice form. This was the block of wood that I used to fit inside when we drilled the holes on the smoke box. So that would be a good rough guide to begin with. And I've got my Dremel handy here. I've got my face mask, hearing protection, and I'm getting ready to use some little grinding bits and sanding and flap wheels just to see if I can remove this little bit here, this little flash, little ridge in there, and sand it smooth. And I can check the fit with this, and then I'll check it on the actual smoke box itself. And I've got an idea, if it doesn't work by hand really well, I've got an idea about wrapping this with some sandpaper and even perhaps mounting it on a drill, putting it in the lathe, and running it up against it as a little machining surface. But I'm not sure I'm going to need that to do that. I'm going to start with the Dremel and see how it goes. I'll bring you back and show you a little intermediate step. Really pleased with the fit that I've got here with the base of the chimney against the smoke box, and I just used the Dremel with a grinding stone, a sanding drum, and then I basically just hand sanded with some coarse sandpaper wrapped around that disc. I'll show you you can see what's left. The blue is that's the part that hasn't been sanded away yet, obviously. So pretty pleased with the fit overall, and I think even though LBSC talks about not bolting it down, I do think that I'm going to bolt this down, maybe a couple of bolts on the side, but that'll come later. Next for this is to mount it on a mandrel so I can turn the outside, so I'll show you that. Well, there's our chimney on the arbor. It's secured with crazy glue, kind of like a rotisserie spit barbecue thing. As you can see, I've got my little diamond tool holder all set up so that I can put the detail work on the top. And I've made, I looked at page 179 of the book and made some notes about the dimensions that are called for according to the sketch in the book. Honestly, for me, it's just a matter of cleaning this thing up and not removing much metal. So I'll put the detail in the top like they call for, and I plan to use some files. I may turn this down with the tool. We'll see, but the main objective is there's not a lot of material to remove, and the main objective is just to clean it up and get it looking uniform. So I'll bring you back when we're made some progress on that. Got the chimney machined down just like I want it to, all the different dimensions and details, and at a certain point it became obvious that I didn't really need to remove any more metal. There's plenty there, I just didn't want to go any deeper. So what I've done now, I've filed, and there's a couple of, like, a little casting line there. So I filed and I used sandpaper, and I've used my Dremel here with the little, I'll pull the Dremel over here and you can see what I'm doing. A little flapping wheel sander just to take out some of the rough marks. And I'm going to hit it with some fine sandpaper, and I'll take a buffing wheel to it before I take it off the arbor. Then the final polishing with a bit of Scotch-Brite pad, a pretty well used one. Pretty happy with the finish. Kind of looks like a little brass candlestick or something. Bronze candlestick, I guess I should say. Kind of a shame. I'll probably end up painting this thing, maybe all except for the top part. But pretty much going to call this done here at this stage, and stop it, heat it up, use the heat gun to break the bond with the crazy glue and pull it off, and I'll show you what the finished product looks like. Well, here's the finished chimney in place. I have not put any screws in there yet. I still think I might. I need to get some little tiny flathead screws like I used to hold the smoke box together. Let me show you the inside here, get some light. I did finally file down the space there and able to get the third screw on the steam header. So I'm pretty pleased with that, and with this we will wrap up this week's episode. Again, thanks everybody, and welcome again to the new subscribers. Please give me a thumbs up, ask any questions that you like. I appreciate you and hope you have a great week.